Good afternoon. My name is Christopher Pepsicki. This is homework for outputs for Internet, Web, and Technologies. So I've kind of designed this video now to move somewhat faster through questions 1 through 5 and get really in detail with questions 1 through 6, which was us having to use XMPP to visualize our PHP files. So we're just going to move straight ahead. Code 1, you see that is a little story here. So that's a JavaScript script. It generates a short story composed of just random sentences in the form of limericks. It's just a combination of random elements from predefined arrays. And each sentence follows that same structure as a limerick should and just contributes to the overall narrative. So we can move down to question 2. So the HTML part of this code consists of a form that includes things like text areas where you can enter English, display piglang, and it also provides a button for the translation, selecting all the text and clearing the input when pressed. So there is an input and an output field and a maximum line length and a checkbox, for the learning mode. So question 3 has 2 different photos here. So question 3 is an HTML document that contains the JavaScript code to prompt the user for the sentence split. So the sentence into individual words and display the words in reverse order. Now, I did this because I wrote a loop that inside the loop has a document.write and tokens that writes the words from the tokens arrays in reverse order to this web page. And it always starts with the last word in the tokens array and goes backwards by subtracting I from the index, but it also attends a space after each word. Now, code 4 is this right here. This to find the occurrence of each letter. So this is just a very simple script for finding the occurrence in each letter in a user inputted string. This code allows you to enter a string, and upon clicking the submit button, it just counts the occurrences of each letter, and it is case insensitive. So whether it's a positive or a negative, it's good. Whether it's capital or non-capital, it's going to show the same exact result for that. And question 5 down here, and this just allows you to enter a date. You get to select a date from a whole field of calendar. It doesn't make a difference, and view it in different formats, including full date and time, UTC, readable, short date. It kind of goes on the international format and full date as well. So now let's kind of get into the meat and potatoes here, and that's questions 6, 7, and 8. If you notice that I did include the top title of the local host, so we can see that I am using it through my local host setting. So question 6, it's a code. It just initializes a string variable called states with a space that separates the list of stats names. So I started off originally with an empty array, which is the states array, to create and store the match states. The string itself, named states, is split into an array called states1 using the explode function and using a space as the delimiter. From there, when the code goes through the several loops that I have written, using the for each kind of constructor to iterate over each state in state 1, the code uses the preg match function with the regular expression to perform patterns of working with the current state. So then if this goes through and a match is found, we then assign the state with an index of the state arrays, which was currently empty. And then after we go through all the loops, the code will then print out the states array elements using the echo tag. So long story short, the code separates the states from the string. It uses regular expressions to find specific states. The match states are stored in the array that was originally empty. And this code just demonstrates how to use regular expressions in PHP to show matching and extracting specific strings from any input that is given. So that's this one up here. So now we can go down to the email validator. So this code itself on localhost creates a web page where users can check if their email address is valid or not. So the way that I explained this is very kind of broken down and very easy, because if I decided to break down everything at once, the code would take quite a while to read. So if you see that the heading up top just says email validator, and there's a form with an input field where the users can enter the email address. So when the user hits the validate button, that's when the PHP code is kicked in. So it will bring in the email that was entered by me, you, or whoever decides to use it. It uses the filter variable function to create a filter validated email to check if the email is actually addressed. So then once that button's pressed and it goes through that, if the email is valid, it'll display a message saying that this is a valid email address, and opposite if it's not a valid email address. So it shows like the indicating the validity of the email address will be shown on the web page. So it's just, this code itself is just a simple way for people to be able to input an email and things like that and check with immediate feedback to see if it is a valid email or not. So next down here is localhost. Question homework 4, question 8.php. Now this one was not only using the local host and the PHP reader. This was using MySQL as well, because what I had to do is create a database. So I'm going to go through and kind of explore that just a little bit more, just in a few just quick little bullet points, so it makes for an easy understanding. So we have created a web application for storing and displaying certain URLs and their description. So by doing that, it establishes a database connection using the PTO and defines the configuration details. So some of the functions that we have defined in here is display database contents, which retrieves and displays the URLs from the database in the table format itself. So that's pulling it directly from the database that we've created in MySQL. It also has a validate URL, which means that it checks to see if the URL is valid. And we do that by using, once again, the PHP's filter validate URL. And then it also just has a very simple check that is, the form has been submitted. So that is a post request. So then once that happens, so if the form is submitted, so if me and you are typing in a URL and a description and we hit submit, what happens next? So what happens is the code will retrieve the URL and the description values from the form itself that is on the local host. If it is valid, it will then insert that and connect to MySQL and insert the URL description and the description into the database table. Then from there, that will now call the display database contents, and that will display the updated contents of the database. So this whole code is rendered as an HTML form, so anybody can use it. And it does display the initial contents of the database, which is still the same function as before, the database contents. So in summary, it is just a code that allows the users to submit the websites and the descriptions of those websites and stores them in a database, and then puts that stored data into a table from the local host and from MySQL onto the web page where it's shown. So that there is homework 4 of outputs. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day.